Small business is still a powerful force in this country and employs 30 something million people. And that group of people, if those people can share in ownership and feel good about their work and find meaning in their work, I think that could change the nature, kind of change the chemistry of our culture and our economy. At the end of that period in the 1970s, the average CEO's pay was 20 times the average worker. It's now 300 times.
We started to see that divide kind of growing and growing and growing, and yeah, it just hasn't stopped.
And if wages had kept up with CEO pay, right now the minimum wage would be over $100 an hour.
Hey everyone, welcome back to the Freedom Experience. I'm your host, John Moncrief, and today we've got an incredible conversation lined up for you. I'm talking with John Abrams. He's an author, a business leader, and a true pioneer in the world of employee ownership. And John's story is really fascinating. He started out building houses on Martha's Vineyard, and over time transformed his company, South Mountain, into a worker-owned cooperative, long before most people even heard of the idea. So in this episode, we talk about why he made that leap, what he learned along the way, and why he believes employee ownership can be a game changer for your business, for the communities that they exist in, and for our economy in general. He's got a new book coming out in June 2025. It's called From Founder to Future. So I really wanted to get a sneak peek behind what's going on in his mind and a sneak peek into what's coming in the book. In this episode, we talk about the power of employee ownership. And John breaks down the different ways that companies can share ownership with their employees, from worker co-ops to ESOPs to employee ownership trusts, and why that's so important for the future of business and work as we know it. John also shares the 5 big changes that can help your business become what he calls a CommonWealth Company. And the truth is it's about more than just profits. It's about creating a business that lasts and that can benefit the people who've helped you to grow your business and make a positive impact on the community that your business exists in. We also talk about why the time is right now. There's millions of small businesses that are set to change hands in the coming years. And John explains why this is a once-in-a-generation opportunity to really rethink ownership and how you can get ahead of the curve in terms of the change of ownership and the way of thinking. And we talk about the art of letting go. If you're a founder like me, you know how hard it can be to let go of control. And John shares his journey of stepping back, trusting his team, and watching his business thrive without him at the helm. All right, let's get into it. Here's my conversation with John Abrams. John, welcome to the show. It's great to have you on today.
Great to be here, John.
Brilliant. John, you are one of the pioneers. You switched to employee ownership back in the late 80s, if I'm not mistaken, and also not typically the kind of employee ownership that we think about. It's co-op business ownership, so a very different model back then, and even today, very different model. I'd love to learn more about your journey and how you decided to follow that path.
Well, it was quite a trajectory, So I came of age in times that had similarities to these times. We had another tyrant as president, Richard Nixon, and the most corrupt administration until the one that started a few weeks ago. And at the same time, there was this bubbling up among the youth of the U.S. And part of that, for me, there was so much happening. It was impossible to sit in a classroom. And so I ended up embarking on this 6-year back to the land odyssey with many, many others. And during that time, I got kind of addicted to craft and design. And I mean, we were just fixing up old buildings to live in and barely keeping the rain out, but it became a passion. And then in 1975, my partner and I had an opportunity to build a house on Martha's Vineyard, and we thought we'd go to this godforsaken place, and we'd spend 6 months there, and then we'd head back to Vermont with a pocket full of money. And 6 months later, we were still slaving away on this hand-built house, and a year later, we were still, and the money was all gone. But the results were pretty good, and somebody else asked us to build a house. And this kept happening. And we suddenly looked around at a certain point and realized, oh my God, we're in business, which is so antithetical to all that we care about. And at the time, there was I had this close friend who was older and a mentor, and he loved our work and he followed it. And one time he was looking at a house with me, and he said, um, it's beautiful. The work is beautiful. Are you making any money? And I kind of chuckled and said, no, we seem to lose money on everything we do. And he said, Abrams, you've got a unique idea here, subsidized housing for the rich. And that was like a dagger, it was a bombshell. But that moment, I felt like I want to learn about business. I want to learn about what it means. I want to learn about how it can be a force for good. I want to learn to build subsidized housing for those who actually need it. And it launched me on this journey of exploration that keeps going 50 years later. And there was a turning point, a hinge point for the company that we ended up founding, South Mountain Company. My partner left, and 12 years into it, two guys, Steve Sinnett and Pete Ives, who had been there from the very beginning, they were close friends, and they came to me and they said, we've been talking to each other, and we don't want to go into business for ourselves and do the usual thing. We want to stay here for our careers. But we need more of a stake. We need more than an hourly wage. And it struck me that at the moment, I could have easily made them some kind of partners. But it occurred to me that if we do our job well, this will happen over and over again. And maybe we could imagine a structure that would invite people in year after year after year. And we did not have to imagine, because we stumbled on the worker co-op. There were only about a dozen in the country at the time. There are about 1,000 now. And this just, it checked all the boxes. It resonated with my own communal and collaborative experience. And it felt like this is made for us, although it was scary. So for a while, I felt like I was, holding onto the reins of a runaway horse, like oh my God, are we really going to do this thing? I mean, I had the most financial and emotional investment. And my fear was that this thing that we had created, that I loved, that I would end up not loving once I lost control. Well, that never happened. It only got better. So that kind of took, so South Mountain became this 40-person architecture, building, and solar company. And it really, the business part of it and the shared ownership and the participatory democracy became the parts of it that I loved to work with. And during all those years, I would talk to other people that were thinking about this and help them along in their journey. So I felt like this was a business that I wanted to go on, and that outlive me. And so we began planning for that in 2014. I mean, I think I'd have to say that South Mountain changed dramatically in 2008, in the crash of
Yeah.
2008. I sometimes say it was the second best thing that ever happened to South Mountain after the ownership change, because it really made us think hard about our own resilience and how we would weather storms like this. We had weathered storms before, but nothing like that.
I
And
just
it
wanted
was
I was going to quickly ask you, going back to what you said at the time, there were about 12 of these companies around. How did you stumble
worker
across?
co-op.
Yeah, how did you
Yeah.
stumble across this ownership model?
I don't know. I think I learned everything I learned in those days. I basically learned from the Whole Earth Catalog, from Stuart Brandt's Whole Earth Catalog. So I probably learned about it from there, but I don't really know.
I just
But
think
we
yeah,
were
you,
lucky. We were lucky. We
yeah,
found a group called, at the time it was called the Industrial Cooperatives Association, and they worked with people becoming worker co-ops. They're now called the ICA Group. And Dave Hammer, who is the executive director of ICA, which has grown tremendously, says, yeah, in those days, the whole story of worker co-ops in the US was ICA. It was us.
yeah.
Now there's a whole infrastructure. And worker co-ops worldwide have had a massive impact, but they were not well known in the US.
Gotcha, yeah. And so when you converted um, South Mountain Company originally, how many of you were involved at that stage when when you first went through the process of?
There were 12 employees at the time,
Okay,
and three became myself, and these two other guys became the owners. And um, we had a very long period to ownership, 5 years, and gradually that ownership expanded quickly, actually, because there were some people that had been there for a long time. Um, and people just stayed. Between 2015 and 2022, when I retired, 9 people retired from South Mountain during those years who had been there for an average of 32 years. So people just stayed.
yeah.
Once they became owners, it really made such a difference in longevity and retention.
And yeah. And when you, and maybe I was taking a step back first, just thinking about the audience and the difference between all of these ownership structures. The kind of one that we know best, I guess, is an ESOP, an employee stock ownership sort of structure, and then we have the employee ownership trusts, and we have a co-op business. How do all of these things differ? Just so that the folks listening kind of have a little bit of context, I guess.
I just wrote a book about this, and it'll be out on June 3rd. But and it's called From Founder to Future, and it's about these transitions from original founder to next generation. There are roughly 6,000 ESOPs in the US. It's by far the most widespread form of employee ownership, and it employs, I think, something like 12 million people, the various ESOPs. And it's a structure that is limited to the US because it's based on US tax law. And then the worker co-op flies a little bit under the radar. I think I said that there are roughly 1,000 in the
Yeah,
country at this point, but there's a tremendous explosion of interest. And then the employee ownership trust, which is the third that you mentioned, very new to the US, but widespread in Britain. Most employee owned companies in Britain are employee ownership trusts, and it's recently come to the US and generated tremendous interest. I would say that right at this moment, there's probably only 50 or 75 EOTs in the
in the
country,
US.
but there's some very high profile. Um, so it's the employee ownership trust And then it's kind of partner, the perpetual purpose trust, which really means that the company is owned by a purpose. Um, and Patagonia became a perpetual purpose trust, highly publicized. Zingerman's, which is an amazing company, layered a perpetual purpose trust onto their employee ownership structure. So there's been a lot of interest in employee ownership trusts, and I think there's huge potential. Um, the the difference with an ESOP is that it co-ops work at any scale. ESOPs are expensive to form. They have um, they have extensive reporting requirements, annual reporting requirements. There's a lot of regulatory noise in an ESOP, um, and they don't have any kind of actual employee um, engagement and rights, except for the stock ownership, built into the model.
Gotcha.
But some companies have used the ESOP structure and become extraordinary companies that are have the same degree of democracy and wealth sharing that worker co-ops do. And the trust, the trust can go anywhere. Um, the 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 employees don't actually own an employee ownership trust. The trust owns it, but the trust is set up for the benefit of the employees. Now, I think the jury is still out on where that's going to go and how successful it's going to be, but I think I actually think it's a great thing to layer on top of a worker co-op or
Okay.
an ESOP, because one of the problems with ESOPs is that they're susceptible. If they get an offer from private equity, and many of these employee-owned companies are so successful that they're a great target for private equity and strategic buyers. And if they get an offer, they must consider it. And sometimes they get bought for the wrong reasons, and the ESOP no longer exists. So future employees do not get to take advantage of it. And we know what happens with private equity, and these sometimes
Yeah.
these companies get carved up, relocated, sold for parts, and sometimes founders who sell to strategic buyers and private equity end up with fat wallets and broken hearts, as a friend of mine said. And many, what I'm finding in talking to people is that, people have put heart and soul into these businesses for 30 or 40 years, and they want to see the mission of their company endure. So selling to the employees is a way that it really can.
Yeah.
And that actually, I think we can change the economy in certain ways. You know, it's always amazing to me that from the 30s to the 60s, labor unions helped create a prosperous American middle class by negotiating higher wages, great benefits. Wealth and income inequality declined significantly. But at the end of that period in the 1970s, the average CEO's pay was 20 times the average worker. It's now 300 times.
We started to
If
see that divide kind of growing and growing and growing, and yeah, it just hasn't stopped.
Absolutely. And if wages had kept up with CEO pay, right now the minimum wage would be over $100 an hour. That
So
has
just
not happened.
no, just going back to what you were saying earlier, though, for the business owner, the CEO who has gone down the ESOP line, layering in an employee ownership trust on top of that might be a way of protecting purpose going forward. So if purpose is a key kind of driver in protecting that legacy, layering that
It may
EOT on
be,
top.
and
Yeah,
and people are thinking about that, and
interesting. Yeah,
certainly some of the most forward-thinking ESOPs are looking at new ways to protect legacy, to protect longevity, um, to fend off
yeah,
buyers that don't have the same intentions. So I think there's tremendous change happening in the employee ownership world. There is increasing interest, and a great infrastructure has developed that didn't exist when it certainly didn't exist when we converted, but 20 years ago it didn't exist either. When I wrote my earlier book, this infrastructure did not exist, and
yeah.
it has blossomed. It has blossomed.
Yeah, because I think of somebody. I've had Eric Rigo, who's also a small giant, on the show before, and talking about getting Webbit services to fully employee owned, 100% ESOP by 2030, and his purpose being kind of to bridge that gap between, or to close the divide between haves and have-nots, and being a beacon for other businesses out there to do the same for his partners, his customers, his suppliers. But then you think of this risk of private equity coming in and just kind of scooping it up. So for him,
Well, and it's not that easy. So,
yeah,
and you can protect, but so Eric Rieger and Webbit. So there's an example of the best expression of the ESOP.
yeah,
And there are others like Revision Energy in Maine, and once again, Nut Butter in New York State. There are many ESOPs that are kind of leading the way in my view, because I put all of this in the context, John, of I see 5 transitions that are important for businesses to think about. And there's ownership to start with, from proprietary to widely shared and
this
accessible
is
to all.
the transition to a sort of commonwealth type company. The five
That's right.
transitions. Yeah,
So there's ownership, there's leadership from an original founder to next generation. There's mission, from unprotected mission, like we're talking about, to permanent preservation of purpose. There's management and governance, from top down control to participatory and democratic. And finally, there's impact, from doing business as usual to becoming a certified B Corp force for good. So these 5 transitions are central to what I'm talking about in
yeah.
this book. And I and no company should be expected to fully achieve all these. Few companies have, but these 5 transitions, if you're holding them as goalposts, even if it takes decades or generations to get all the way down the field, I think can become um, a roadmap to business truly being a force for good.
So just to connect the dots there again for the audience, we mentioned Commonwealth Company and B Corps for a moment. The Commonwealth model, is that tying back to that sort of British model that we were talking about earlier, and the Commonwealth? Is that the connection there? Or?
That's just a term that I use to
Okay,
describe these companies that are engaged in pursuing these 5 transitions. Um, and as I perceive them, Commonwealth companies employ constant learning and improvement with loose steering and control to create continuity and longevity and resilience and impact and
okay,
equity.
love it. Okay,
So
so
that's the
that's that
Commonwealth.
Commonwealth. Got it. Makes sense. And they would presumably then have to be B Corps. Is that
I mean, they don't have to be. Uh, it's all about common ownership, profits, power, information, purpose. And yes, B Corp is a good avenue, but some people just do this without that kind of structure. Um, I think of my friend Ari Weinswig, who co-founded Zingerman's, and I think of them as one of the premier Commonwealth companies.
yeah?
But um, he says about B Corp, he goes, "Oh yeah, we'll probably do that sometime, but we just never got around to it." They do everything a B that an exemplary B Corp
Would do,
does.
but they've never made that transition
Yeah, they
to
just
be.
never
Yeah,
did.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah,
So everybody, I mean, every company's different. People do it their own way, and there's no right way. There's no right degree. The you know the the kind of the worker co-op for some people is maybe a little too radical and a
yeah.
little too scary. So that's why it's great that there are these various models, and you can find what fits your mentality and your business's mentality. So I feel like the employee ownership, um, the big umbrella, has room for everybody.
Okay. So the big thing here to keep in mind is that there is a trend toward employee ownership, and there's a reason that's happening, and we'll jump into that in a moment. But I think a lot of business owners and entrepreneurs are scared of letting go of leasing control. Or this is a big fear, and I think to some extent you mentioned that a little bit earlier when you sort of, I think, talked about being kind of behind a galloping horse or something when you when you first put your foot in. But letting go of control is such a big issue, and I suppose the key thing here is to realize that there's not just one size. There are options, and you should be exploring those options.
There's a fit for you
There's a fit for you. Yeah.
that's really gonna satisfy you, and you've got to do something. We all get older, and the mentality of, they're going to have to drag me out of here feet first. That's the path to disaster, because these transitions take a tremendous amount of intentional planning, and I actually advocate for separating. What usually happens is the owner's getting ready to retire, and they go, "Oh my God, what am I going to do?" And they start exploring their options, and so they have to deal with the ownership transition and the leadership transition all at once. And I advocate for disentangling those two things.
Okay.
Do the ownership transition early. It's kind of transactional. It's less. It takes less preparation, and then do it when you're not ready to retire. Do it way before, so you have a long runway to creating the leadership transition, to building leadership internally. And that makes for a path, no matter what kind of employee ownership it is, um, to do the ownership transition first, and then devote yourself to preparing for your own exit.
Makes a lot of sense. Kind of thinking back to something Rob Dubé said to me as well, is when you think in 10-year chunks, time almost kind of stands still a bit. So being intentional, saying, first we're going to deal with the ownership side of things, set that up, get it all configured. That's where we want to be 10 years from now. The leadership will
Exactly.
be kind of 5 years in, and that's how we're going to do this. And it makes so much sense to get intentional about it.
And it really takes 7 to 10 years to
Yeah.
develop that kind of leadership capacity, unless you've been doing it right along, which is what we all should be doing, is
But we don't.
planning for succession from day one,
Yeah.
imagining the future at the beginning.
Because we have this feeling of immortality, don't we? When we start to think it's never going to happen. But this feels really important to me right now. I mean, there's a lot of talk everywhere about silver tsunamis and all of those kind of things going on. But AI, the rise of AI, jobs, community. Why is this so important for us right now? I'm really curious on your perspective on that.
Well, it all goes back to the extraordinary concentration of wealth that has happened in this country in the last 50 years. It has just flowed up, 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 up. And now I think there's an opportunity to start to spread wealth out. And I think that generally wealth inequality is, um, it's not on a level with climate change, but it is because
Yeah.
it's what's driving our society to be angry and sad, and people don't know who to blame. And there are, small business is still a powerful force in this country and employs 30 something million people.
Yeah.
And, and that group of people, if those people can share in ownership and become and feel good about their work and find meaning in their work, uh, that's I think that could change the nature, kind of change the chemistry of our culture and our economy. And this is the moment. I mean, it's always been the moment, but and when I think about these things, when I think about what's going on in the country now, what was going on 50 years ago, I mean, I think about it. The human project is a long-term project, and the fact that we've never made it to liberty and justice for all, well, we're making our way, and this is a part of that effort of liberty and justice for all.
We're kind of moving closer all the time. We're moving our
I
way
think so.
toward that, but it's a
We have
journey.
these blips, and now
We
we're
have
down
our
in the
stuff.
valley, but we'll come out of that
We'll come out of it.
valley.
Yeah. I mean, I think I was looking at a report which had similar figures to what you were talking about, but nearly 50% of the GDP is small business. Yeah, half of the business, just about half the business in the US employs, that makes up, or employees are employed by just about half of the small business. And we are going through this process now where there's a massive switch of kind of, or transition of ownership. The timing feels like it's right, and there's a whole lot of other things going on. But how do we?
Exactly, because the ownership transitions are going to happen,
Yeah.
or the doors are going to close, and there are going to be empty places on Main Street. Something's going to happen with all these founder-led baby boomer
Businesses.
businesses. So we might as well capture the moment, and and I feel like people don't really know their options.
I agree with you. I think that's
Business brokers, attorneys, accountants, they don't know about these options, so people are not hearing what the possibilities are. That's the
so.
purpose of this book, and that's the purpose of this work.
The scenario is, John, I mean, somebody goes into a business broker and it's not sellable. So they think, okay, that's the end of it.
Yeah.
They don't even think beyond, well, what about potentially doing something with the employees, and it close the doors and jobs are lost. And yeah, so it's how to educate those folks.
And there's some incredibly interesting, I mean, first of all, the US is the US, but um, employee ownership worldwide has a very different history. And there are parts of the world, um, the province of Emilia Romagna
Yes.
in northern Italy, which is the capital is Bologna, the beautiful city
Yes.
of Bologna. This is one of the most prosperous areas in the world. And the reason for it is that there are thousands and thousands of sophisticated worker cooperatives working in collaboration with a government that cares about people. And so we have models, and there's another one in Spain called Mondragon. We have models for and now what's really exciting to me is these are starting to happen in the US. There's an organization called the Industrial Commons in North Carolina, in a little city, Morganton, North Carolina, which was a center of the furniture and textile industry until it was all offshored and these places closed up. And two women there have started this organization to rebuild industry in that region. Um, there And one of the things that we see, there are a number of these kind of networks forming. And one of the things we see is that when people are associated, when businesses are associated with businesses that have made these transitions, it's infectious and it starts to spread um, into these wonderful networks. So, um, and when you were talking about, and there's a lot of employee ownership experimentation going on that the jury's kind of out
Yeah.
on how's it going to work. When you were talking about these companies that brokers say, we can't sell your company, there's no way. There's a company called Team Shares. Have you heard of them?
No, I haven't. Oh, but I'll
And
look
I
them
think
up and put them in the
the
notes.
jury's out on them, but
Okay.
here's this company. They're using private capital to buy small businesses. And we're talking about businesses like laundromats and tire shops and blue collar businesses, and make them into co ops and gradually turn the ownership over to the employees so that they will be 80% employee owned in 20 years. This is what they say. And they are also providing back end services to give accounting and
All the
different
back office services
sure,
that.
that these companies need and can't really afford to pursue. So the reason I'm telling you all this is that in 4 years, they have bought something like 80 businesses, super small businesses. Most of these businesses, the owner was just going to close the door. They thought their business was valueless.
Yeah.
So these kinds of conglomerations of employee-owned businesses can really have an impact.
I
I
love that.
hope they
I'll
do.
look them
I hope
up.
they're
Yeah.
able to do what they
What
say
they
they
say can
they
do.
intend to do. So
Because you see so much
we'll all be
about you see so much about kind of acquisition entrepreneurship at the moment, and it seems to be the big kind of conversation. Go out and buy the unsexy businesses, the laundromats, the whatevers, and pick them up for next to nothing or no money down or whatever it is. It's good to hear that there's a different approach, and as you say, I hope they are, the jury's still out, but
and there are a
in,
number of these happening. A number of
instead handing
yeah,
over to employees,
yeah,
there's another option for the business owner
yeah.
in terms of doing something with the employees. Uh, what we're talking about, small business, something that really resonated with me that you said or that you wrote was sometimes frantic growth, I think, becomes a purpose in itself, or the perversion of other purpose. And it really resonated with me because I went through that kind of growth, just grow, 5 million, 10 million, 20 million, whatever. And everything was the sake of growth. Um, yeah, I guess I'd love to hear your thoughts on growth and how you, because you went through those ups and downs where you put the brakes on at times in the co-op kind of. How did you make those decisions, and how do you handle that in an employer-owned business?
Well, I think that the the background is that Wall Street has taught us that we grow or we die.
Yeah,
Nothing can be further from the truth. Um, and so we have this if we're not growing, then we're not successful mentality. But many, many businesses operate at a place where things stabilize and they're working well. And this is not this is something to celebrate, not to worry about. Um, but at South Mountain, we always felt like growth was something that we would do when we had a reason for growing, something new that we could achieve, something new that we could share. Um, and so many companies who are pursuing a mission grow, I think, for the right reasons because they want to do more of this thing. Um, my friends at Revision Energy in Maine, um, who have become one of the largest solar companies in the Northeast, they say, what we do is important. And so we want to do more of it. But we've got to maintain our values. That comes first, growth comes second. So I think being careful about growth. Ed Abbey once said, um, "Uncontrolled growth is the ideology of the cancer cell."
Yes. Yeah, so true.
Right.
Yeah.
So we have to be thinking all the time about intentional growth, and also I think we forget sometimes that there's the opportunity of internal growth without actual growth. We can grow all of the systems that we employ. We can grow our efficiency. We can grow our service. We can become more and more exemplary in the way we do business. And to me, that's the kind of growth that we really want.
How do you align that
Quality.
with
Growth and quality.
inequality? Yeah. And I think that's maybe where my answer lies on this question. But I'm curious, John, about how you align that with kind of employee expectations, and particularly in a shared ownership model where they kind of come in and say, John, I've almost outgrown the company, or I'm
That is such an issue. And sometimes that in itself is a reason for growth, to provide opportunity within the company.
gotcha. Okay.
And whereas this other kind of growth that I'm talking about, this kind of internal growth, that's another source of opportunity. And um, back to Zingerman's for a moment, they've had a really interesting take on this, which is that they are they are limiting their businesses to the Ann Arbor area.
Yeah.
They will not go beyond that. But if any employee comes to them with an idea for a business and they think it's a good idea, they will finance the business, help the business, and get those employees started. And so now, what was originally one business is now this Zingerman community of businesses. It's 9 businesses, and it's thriving. And it's completely changed Ann Arbor.
Yeah.
700 employees. So they're a big business that's a small business, that's made up of a constellation of small businesses. So,
Family
yeah.
businesses. Yeah. Yeah.
So there's so many ways to do this. And it's all about intention. It's all about if you really care, if you care about other things besides making money. Yeah, we've got to make money. Our business needs to make money. We need to have money to share with others. But there's more to care about than the bottom line. There's all 3 bottom lines. There's the social bottom line. There's the environmental bottom line. And when all of them are used as as our guiding lights, we get to do something that's so much more rewarding. We're so lucky that we get to do this stuff.
Yeah, we are. And have these kind of conversations.
Yeah.
And do these kind of things. Yeah, we are very lucky. I was just kind of thinking about talking about Zingerman's for a moment, and how any employee comes in and kind of has an idea, and if the decision is made to invest in that, they will do that. But I was wondering, in the sort of model, employees are buying into the business, right? So there's kind of a period or honeymoon period before they are deciding to make an investment into the business themselves or joining the co-op. Is
Yeah, and the existing owners have to approve new owners, and um, and then they have a full ownership share. And one of the great misconceptions about co-ops is that you don't want 25 people making all the decisions. Of course you don't. Co-ops need leadership the way any business needs leadership, maybe more. And the only the the difference is that when it comes to policy decisions, the direction of the company, um, the big decisions about where the company goes, that's the employee's
making it?
decision. But management, yes, you can have good collaboration in management, but you need leadership. And you don't want people standing around drawing straws for who does that next task. You want the people that can best do that task to do it.
So you've chosen that structure in terms of employee ownership, but you still have, as you were saying earlier, you've got to build a good, strong leadership team. So you're still going to have that in place, and there's still the leadership, but the direction for the sort of vision and the direction of the company and where it's going is coming from the employees to a large extent.
And you can build that leadership throughout the company. And the more of it, the better.
And is there a size, kind of an ideal size or
I don't think so.
limitation? No.
I don't think so. The Mondragon cooperatives have 70,000
Yeah,
employees.
I remember reading about that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I don't think there's a size limitation. I think um, co-ops work incredibly well at 20 employees to 200 employees. That
That kind
maybe
of,
is the sweet spot, but I think it can work at any scale.
okay. So if companies are considering employee ownership models at the moment, what sort of advice have you got for them? Where do they start?
Um, Reading,
Listening?
listening. Yeah,
Yeah.
I think that um, there are resources today that there weren't
Yeah.
earlier. Um, I mean, the real purpose of my book is to kind of pull those together and show people here's the different things you can do and the different places you can go. But and it depends. There's a huge infrastructure to service the needs of companies that want to become ESOPs. But it's kind of ferreting out what do you want to become?
Yeah.
Many of those service providers have a model that they pursue, and that's the one. So you've got to think more broadly about who you are and what you want and what your employees want. Um,
Just going back to what you're
so,
saying about being intentional at the beginning, like take the
yeah,
time to think about what it is that you actually want here.
yeah.
Yeah.
But if you
And
start to research, for example, the National Center for Employee Ownership, which is traditionally concentrated mainly on ESOPs,
yes,
but it also works with co-ops and EOTs. Um, they have a ton of information. And now, about, say, 5 to 10 years ago, there were several state employee ownership associations. There was one in Ohio, one in Vermont, and I don't know when the one in Colorado started. Now there's an organization called EOX, which is making these state employee ownership centers. And I think they're up to 25 or 30 states. And so in most states, there's a place to go that can help guide you toward information sources.
so the trick is to I mean, it sounds like there's more and more information available. Get out, figure out where you want to be and what you want to be doing, get intentional, and then do a bit of research, and then find the right person to help you navigate.
Exactly.
Being
Yes.
wrong.
Yes. Yeah.
What about your purpose? What's the mission or the purpose that you're on right now? I kind of got a sense that you have some goals by 2040, and
Yeah. I mean, I want to see millions of employee owners in this
yeah,
country. Um, Millions more than there are. I don't see why there can't be 50 million employee owners by, say, 2040. Um, and I just want to do as much as I can in my own modest way to spread that word. So when I wrote Companies We Keep in 2008, I had no ambitions for that book. It was just something I wanted to do and something I wanted to say. And if somebody read it, that would be great. Turns out people did read it,
yeah, it
and
was good. I really enjoyed
some
reading
people
it.
got something out of it. But it was not my mission.
Yeah,
Book, I feel like it's a message that belongs in our culture right now, and that all of these small business owners have a right to at least have this information in front of them. So I'm going to work on that. I'm going to work on getting this
love it.
one out there, unlike the way I did not work on the other one before. See what happens.
See what happens. One last question. Name of the show is Freedom Experience. What does freedom mean to you, John?
Freedom means waking up every morning and doing exactly what you want to do. I mean, I was so lucky. I had this work that pulled me out of bed every morning like a magnet, and that is freedom to
That's yeah.
me. And I actually always thought that I had the best job in the world. I got to do the things I love in the way that I want. Um, it wasn't so free. I was My job was to be a servant to a group of other people, but the rewards from that were just fantastic. So maybe it's not freedom, but it sure is a kind of liberation that is restorative and rewarding.
I love that analogy about the magnet pulling you out of bed, that magnetism to pull you out of
Let's
bed.
go.
That's brilliant. John, thank you so much for coming on. I really appreciate it. And I'll put everything we've talked about, notes together for the listeners. Been hugely
John,
helpful.
thank
Thank
you
you.
so much for having me and for doing what you do. This is wonderful what you do.
I
I love it.
appreciate it. Thanks.